My name is Muhammad ZULFADHLI bin HAMDAN. Central Nervous System, CNS. What is a central nervous system? The spinal cord and the brain form the central nervous system. Is one of the two components of the nervous system. The body's processing hub is the central nervous system. Most bodily processing, including smell, movement, thought, language, and the five senses, hearing, sight, taste, touch, and consciousness are controlled by the brain. Next is central nervous system components. The building blocks of the nervous systems are known as neurons. They transmit electrical or chemical information to and from the brain. Neurons are arranged in networks. Blood vessels, cells, and neurons make up a gray matter. Next is the mind. The brain is divided into several components. These include the brainstem, thalamus, hypothalamus, cerebellum, and the cerebrum. The largest part of the brain is called the cerebrum. It is in charge of regulating thought, memory, personality, feelings, language, and especially for movement. The peripheral nervous system, PNS. The peripheral nervous system is one of the body's two primary divisions of the nervous system. Most senses transmit information to your brain through the PNS. It communicates with muscles, enabling movement. The signals used by the brain to regulate vital or unconscious processes like breathing and heartbeat. Next is location of the peripheral nervous system. First of all is cranial nerves. The peripheral nervous system systems include 11 of the 12 nerve pairs that link directly to the brain. The skin of the head, face, and neck contains 11 nerves that are a component of the senses of smell, sound, taste, and touch. Next is spinal nerves, which is 31 pairs. There are 31 pairs of nerves that attach to the vertebra that make up your spine at around the same level. The brain circuit governing a reflex is depicted in this label reflex arc diagram. It makes it obvious which path is taken in response to a stimulus and how the activity is carried out. From an evolutionary standpoint, reflex action has been crucial to preserving the survival of creatures, since it is allowed speedy responses to circumstances where an organism's existence may be in danger. Next, response action. A quick reflex response to stimuli is known as reflex action. This aids organism in making a fast adjustment to a bad situation that could otherwise result in a physical injury or even death. A typical reflex action is pulling out hands away right away after touching something that is hot or cold. Next is afferent nerves. The initial event starts when a sensory organ sends a stimulus to the receptor. The stimulus might take the form of chemicals, pressure, or temperature. Next, the sensory neuron then communicates with the relay neuron by delivering a signal. The signal is subsequently sent to the motor neuron by the relay neuron. The effector, also known as organ or cell that responds to stimuli, receives a signal from the motor neuron. Last but not least, the effector generates a quick response such as a nerve reflex. Neurons. Neurons are cells that transmit a relay electrical and chemical information throughout your nervous system. Cell body. The cell body, sometimes referred to as a soma, is the central portion of neuron. The cell body preserves the structural integrity to the genetic material and supplies energy to power operations. The neuron soma has a nucleus and specialized organelles much like the cell bodies do. Next is axon. A long tail-like structure is an axon. The axon halo, a specialized junction, is where it connects to the cell body, making a fatty material. Insert many axons. Axon can conduct an electrical signal with the aid of myelin. Dendrite. Fibrous roots known as dendrite extend out from the cell body. The dendrites, like actin, pick up and interpret messages sent by the axons of other neurons. The trees or many sets of dendrites are common in neurons. Next, variety of neuron structures, function, and genetic makeup of neurons differ. There are thousands of various types of neurons because of how many there are, just as there are thousands of different species of living things on Earth.
Hi, my name is NADHIRAH, and in this slide I will present about neurotransmitter, glial cells, and myelin sheath. Neurotransmitters are chemical messengers that our body cannot function without it. Neurotransmitter job is to carry chemical signals from one neuron to the next target cell, which can be another nerve cell, a muscle cell, or a gland. Here are 4 types of neurotransmitter and their function. The first one is acetylcholine. Acetylcholine is released at some synapse in the spinal cord and at a neuromuscular junction, and it influences the muscle action. The next is dopamine. Dopamine is released within the brain. It is believed to be involved in mood and thought disorders and in abnormal movement disorders such as Parkinson's disease. The next is endorphins. Endorphins are naturally occurring substances that are produced by the brain to help relieve pain. And the last one is norepinephrine. Norepinephrine affects alertness and arousal, increasing blood pressure and heart rate and releasing stores of glucose in response to stress. It is also a hormone released by the adrenal gland as part of the body's fight or flight response. The next is glial cells. Glial cells are non-neuronal cells in the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system that do not produce electrical impulses. There are 4 functions of glial cells, which are surround neurons and hold them in place. Next is supply nutrients and oxygen to neurons, insulate one neuron from another, and lastly destroy and remove dead neurons. Next is myelin sheath. A myelin sheath is the protective covering made up of glial cells. This white sheath forms the white matter of the brain and covers some parts of the spinal cord and the axon of most peripheral nerves. There are 3 functions of myelin sheath. The first one is fatty protein coating in the myelin sheath provides protective insulation for the nerve cell. Second, it allows electrical impulses to travel quickly and efficiently between one nerve cell and the next cell. And lastly, maintains the strength of the impulse message as it travels down the axon.
Hi, my name is AISHAH SHAKIRAH binti ZORAIMI, and now let's move on to the parts of brain. Brain is consisting of major parts which name as cerebrum, thalamus, hypothalamus, cerebellum, and lastly brainstem. Cerebrum is the largest and located uppermost portion of the brain. In these parts, it has 4 lobes, which is parietal lobe, temporal lobe, frontal lobe, and occipital lobe. The functions of cerebrum helps to give a control at the highest level of thought, including judgment, memory, association, and critical thinking. It also processes sensations and controls all voluntary muscle activity. It also responsible to do these activities such as initiating and coordinating movement, thinking, reasoning, problem solving, emotions and learning, and speech, vision, hearing, and touch. The next part is thalamus. Thalamus is a large egg-shaped mass of grey matter present in diencephalon and is located just below the cerebrum. In the structure of thalamus, it consists of white matter and grey matter. Thalamus also responsible to hold the central position between the cortex and spinal cord as well as other areas of the lower brain, and lastly, the integration of sensory towards thalamus is emotional control, hearing and visual pathway, consciousness, and motor control. If you can see here, there are other parts of brain below the thalamus which is known as hypothalamus. Hypothalamus responsible to control any vital bodily functions. So what is the functions of hypothalamus? Here are 7 things that it can do, which is it could regulate and integrate the autonomic nervous system, including controlling heart rate, blood pressure, respiratory rate, and digestive tract activity. Helps in regulating emotional responses, including fear and pleasure. Regulates body temperature. Regulates food intake by controlling hunger sensations, and regulates water balance by controlling thirst sensations, and regulates sleep wakefulness cycles, and lastly regulates the pituitary gland and endocrine system activity.
Hi, good morning. It's Francisca, EURICA Petipos. In this slide, I will explain about the cerebellum. The cerebellum is the second largest part of the brain. It is located at the back of the head, below the posterior portions of the cerebrum. Look at the dark green part. The cerebellum receives incoming messages regarding movement within joints, muscle tones, and positions of the body. From here, messages are relayed to the different part of the brain that controls the motions of the skeletal muscles. The general functions of the cerebrum are to produce smooth and coordinated movement, to maintain equilibrium, and to sustain normal posture. The brainstem is the stalk-like portions of the brain that connects the cerebral hemispheres with the spinal cord. It is made up of the three parts: the midbrain, pons, and medulla oblongata. The midbrains and pons provide conduction pathways to and from the higher and lower center in the brain. They also control reflexes for movement of the eye and head in response to the visual and auditory stimuli. The medulla oblongata, which located part of the brainstem, is connected to the spinal cord. It controls basic survival functions, including the muscles that make possible respirations, heart rate, and blood pressure, as well as reflexes for coughing, sneezing, and vomiting. The spinal cord is a long, fragile tube-like structure that begins at the end of the brainstem and continues down almost to the bottom of the spinal columns. The spinal cords contain all the nerve that affects the length and lower part of the body and serve all the pathway for impulse traveling to and from the brain. The spinal cord is surrounded and protected by the cerebrospinal fluid and the meninges.
Hi, I'm FARRAH SAQINAH binti SHAHNIZAM representing peripheral nervous system. Do you know what is the peripheral? Peripheral means pertaining to the body parts that are away from the center of the body. Nervous system is the connection of nerves outside the central nervous system, which is the brain and a spinal cord. The peripheral nervous system has two subdivisions, which named somatic and autonomic nervous system. It also consists of the 12 pair of the cranial nerve that extend from the brain, plus 31 pair of the spinal nerve that extend from the spinal cord.
Now, look at the cranial nerve. They have 12 pair nerves in the back of our brain. First, olfactory nerves send the information to the brain to provide sense of smell. The optic nerve is a sensory nerve that involves vision. Oculomotor nerve help eye to move and focus on object. It also helps to control the size of your pupil that is respond to light. The trochlear nerve control your superior oblique muscle which allow the eye to move and blink. The trigeminal nerve is the largest cranial nerve for movement of muscle within jaw and ear. Abducens nerve is the extraocular motor function of the eye movement. Facial nerve is for facial expression as well as providing a sense of taste for tongue. Vestibulocochlear is detecting sense of hearing and a balance. Glossopharyngeal nerve is for sending sensory information from your sinuses, the back of your throat, parts of your inner ear, and the back part of your tongue. Vagus nerve is responsible for digestion and also heart rate. It is stimulating the muscle of your organ in the chest and trunk to move food from your digestive tract and help in regulating normal heart rate. Accessory nerve is controlling the shoulder and neck muscle movement. Lastly, hypoglossal nerve is enable the tongue muscle movement for speak, swallow, and eat.
Spinal nerve consists of cervical, thoracic, lumbar, sacral, and also coccyx. Cervical spinal nerve is stimulate the muscle movement of neck, shoulder, arm, and hand. Thoracic is to control the motor and sensory signal for the upper back, chest, and abdomen. The lumbar nerve are divided into posterior and anterior division that control pain signal and the movement of lower limbs. Sacral nerve responsible for part of the sensory perception and movement of the lower of the body part. Coccyx nerve is the lower part of spinal nerve and it is anterior root helps form coccygeal plexus.
For conclusion, nervous system is complex system derived into two parts: central nervous system, which is brain and spinal cord, and peripheral nervous system, autonomic and somatic nerve that is responsible for body function. The autonomic nervous system controls the involuntary action of the body. The neuron is the basic unit of the nervous system. It consists of a cell body with a nucleus, filament as dendrite, and also a long fiber known as the axon, often surrounded by a myelin sheath. Brain consists of cerebrum, thalamus, hypothalamus, cerebellum, brainstem, and spinal cord. When one of the system damaged, it may cause problems for such as body movement, sense, digestion, and also breathing.